Hello and welcome to the video version of Full Contact Nerd Interviews. I'm Cris Alvarez and thank you for watching. I'm speaking with Nicole Glover, author of The Conductors, to be published by John Joseph Adams, March 2nd, 2021. Thank you for speaking with me.
Oh, it's great to be here.
So first, considering, as a writer, you have all these ideas in your head. How did this particular idea rise above the rest and make it into novel form?
Yeah, it's a weird story how it came together. It's like a bunch of different seeds have been germinating for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I always had like the idea of, I guess, Underground Railroad, the Conductors, and all that other stuff. It's like the first project I did in school was like Harriet Tubman and all the history around that. It's always been interesting, but it's just an idea that's always fascinated me. I've always been a big fantasy writer and always loved all the old school mysteries and whatnot. How it came together is one of those things is basically I was just thinking, I was mulling over different ideas for a story. I think I had started the Conductors itself was started as a straight up historical fiction short story. I had like the idea the main characters were kind of there, but I didn't know where I was going with it. And I think I decided, let's add magic to it. 'Cause I love fantasy stories. Like what happens with it, and it's kind of just bloomed in there. The mystery element kind of fell into place once I added that magic in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from there, just more of this. Did the research for get the history right, and the characters start coming alive, and it just kind of came together. So yeah, it's one of those weird things that just fell into place for me.
Okay, so tell me then the basics of the book, the protagonist, the setting, the conflict.
Okay. The main characters are Hetty and Benji Rhodes. Previously they've been Underground Railroad conductors throughout, just before the Civil War started, throughout the bulk of it, just doing the basics, saving people, that sort of thing, but with magic. That went to that after it. The book itself starts 5 years after the Civil War. I guess 6 years after the Civil War, and in 1871 in Philadelphia, in their home base. Okay. It's basically about them just dealing with the aftermath. So, they're free now. It's what they do in their spare time, and they're like, let's solve mysteries, basically. And then there's magic elements with that, everything too, adding to the layer, to the text, to the world building. And so basically, so we have they have the history of the conducting, also the history of Mr. Solving around town, like just solving major and minor crimes and murders around the city. But the murder that kicks off this book is the death of a close friend of theirs, who was one of the people they had rescued in the past. And it's basically the fallout of what happens when that death of a friend happens with them, to their circle of friends, to the community, and everything else ties around with it.
Mm-hmm. So how extensive is magic in this setting? Did the Confederates have magic? How also? And
yeah, in my view of the world is everyone has magic. It just presents differently. There's the characters use a system called celestial magic, which is the drawing of constellations. But there is also another form like sorcery, which is kind of tagged as like the white people magic, the sorcery that came over from England and the Western Europe, basically, that uses the typical wand waving sort of things. And there's other different types of brands of magic that I don't go out and say, but it's assumed through different traditions, different cultural background, historical elements, that everyone has to do their own kind of brand of magic. And because I like the idea of a world where everyone can do magic. Instead of being like a hidden society where it's only select people, like everyone has the ability to. It's like the same thing, like, people like learn to read or certain skills like art and whatnot. It's just some people are good at it, some people are terrible at it, some people have no interest in it all, and some people want to learn as much as they can. And there's textual layers of like who can do magic too. Like, for example, Black people, non-white people in general can't use sorcery in this world because there's all the typical laws against that. There's like laws against banding using wands, for example. And that's why celestial magic, and there's also another smaller branch, like a brewing potions, that it's kind of touched into in this world that my main characters have ability and access to do as well. But anyway, the magic's I try to make magic a very big thing in the world, because it's a fun thing for me, given the heavy historical aspects of it. Right. And it allows me to do fun stuff within the world itself, within the mystery, within the world, in the inner lives of the characters as well. And I try to make magic in a big happen in every chapter, either small things like like lighting a lamp or something while they're reading a book, or big things like involving the mystery, involving like other aspects of it and stuff. So
Okay. So how much did you sort of make up your own magic systems versus taking from actual traditions?
yeah, I 100% kind of went with this is my own thing for the magic system,
Mhm.
especially for the main, so that this kind of constellation based magic. It's simple of them just drawing the constellations, and boom, magic happens. And I kind of kept it as simple as that. Felt strongly wanted to make something that was uniquely made for this book. So I toyed with the idea of looking at like, I guess, different people, magical traditions that people have, because there are some well-established traditions around the world that, especially within like my background of I guess the mixture of the Caribbean and African and Southern Black traditions, they have their own what could be considered as magic. But I thought about it, but it's not so strongly. I had like enough personal experience that to talk about it in a certain length. And I guess I guess more, I wanted to have the freedom to make up what I wanted to do with it, and so I can do things I wanted to do, and not be afraid of, I guess, not be like kind of limiting myself in certain aspects of it, I guess. But I guess it's mostly I just want to leave in the constellation, because I always loved like astronomy and astrology, so it's like that was fun for me. So that's that really drew me in near the end after I kind of set that in stone.
Mm-hmm. So what about Philadelphia? Why'd you choose that as your base, your city?
Yeah, it's one part of it was a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things I came across in the research is that before the Civil War, Philadelphia had like the biggest free black population. I think it rivaled New York City at the time, and it was always growing. It also had that really healthy community, as what they've been there for generations. That's why it was a big hub for the Underground Railroad. You had like William Still, who was a big station master. He had his offices there. He actually was the one when, if you ever heard of the guy, William Box Brown, the guy who mailed himself in the box, he had actually sent himself to William Still's offices. Harriet Tubman went through Philadelphia. Frederick Douglass had spoke at some of like the famous school and Institute of Colored Youth several times, and it was like a lot of like a groundwork of community building that was very fascinating to me, because I know I guess it's hard. It was just fascinating to kind of see that in Philadelphia. And it also helped. There were a lot of research about it. Like there's a lot of, because of all that history that this city had, you had things like W.W. Du Bois, the Philadelphia Negro, which was his study around 1899 about Philadelphia itself. And he actually gave a walkthrough through Philadelphia's 7th Ward that was really helpful for me for kind of building out what the city looks like, even though it's like about 20-ish, 30-ish years after the time I set my book in. But it gave me a view of what it looked like at that time, and there's a lot of insightful things. And I think also, and like other minor stuff like pop culture, it pops up a lot in as a like a place to be, like for example, the children's series, the American Girl book series with the character Addie Walker. They were set in Philadelphia, and it was that was the books I really loved growing up as a child, and it's because of my nod and some like little Easter egg in a sense for that, to have that book set there basically. But having Philadelphia also allows me to do a lot of just fun stuff that I also like, kind of learn more about the region, because even though I'm not from that area, there's a lot of interesting things that you wouldn't really think about when you think about this particular history in that area. So it was a lot of kind of fun for me, and also just made a good setting. It's also close to a lot of different bigger cities and different areas that I could pull into later for future stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Philly is much different now than it was then, but did you get a chance to go and look at anything?
That was one of the things I wanted to do last year, to be honest, to get on the ground, get boots down on the ground. I actually had time to actually make that trip, and I was like, but things happen. I'll eventually make it. But I think it's a hard thing too is trying to write something historical and using like what real world places too, because when I was drafting up the book, I was using Google Maps to figure out like how far people walk certain streets and stuff like that. And I actually had to go back and dig out the old historical maps, because this the city itself has changed a lot. There's highways and places where they didn't used to be and stuff like that. And I try to keep that in mind. So it's like, so it'd be kind of weird because I remember, I think I remember when I was thinking about doing a trip to Philadelphia. I remember the times when in the past, I'd gone up to New York years ago, I had the story set up in Harlem, New York City and stuff. And I happened to be in New York at the time. So I decided, let's go do a little walking tour. And it was just so different just from all the research because it's overlaying it to what I was seeing then and what I've seen from my research. So I guess that's always that's the risk when you're trying to base on real stuff, you try to get as accurate as possible especially when you have all this, the historical time is different from what the point you're working with and what's right there right now. You get that dissonance a bit. So
I'm speaking with Nicole Glover, author of The Conductors. You can find more information about her work at nicole-glover.com. If you like this episode of Full Contact Nerd interviews so far, please subscribe and hit the like button. If you want daily book suggestions for new fiction and nonfiction studies in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mysteries, gaming, game design, film history, and more, please check out my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, my podcast, Full Contact Nerd Interviews, and my webpage, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. If you're looking for military history and general history, including true crime, please check out my YouTube channel, War Scholar, my podcast, Military History Inside Out, and my webpage, warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com. If you're looking for space history and the science, technology, and business of space, check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, my podcast, Technology in Space, and my website, technologyandspace.com. Now back to the video. What about the sort of the clothing and that sort of thing, like the everyday items that people use then? How'd you research that?
Some of it I found in blog, some of the books I found, they had some pictures in there. A good resource was actually, just looking up all the people have, there's a collection of photos from libraries, mostly that somehow all end up in Pinterest, apparently, of people of that time period. I think there's always these links about the blogs of what they call Black Victorians and whatnot. There's basically people back in the day, and I found a couple of resources and a couple of Pinterest boards that had all these this black and white classic photographs of people just in the fancy dress of their time taking their photographs, and it's kind of amazing. It's I found so many enough that sometimes I still find new stuff. Mm-hmm. Every so often I go back and refresh all the photos I have, and it's just I find new stuff, new images, and it's interesting and helps give me a sense of what they look like, what they're dressing like, and whatnot. And I guess also it's kind of grounds me a little bit more because I still have my own vision of what it is as I'm writing, but seeing it just kind of helps out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Were there any spots in Philadelphia? Any locations that you really had to research, I don't want you to give anything away in the novel, but if you can mention any pivotal areas that you really had to dig in to feel like you got it right.
Nothing in too particular. I do remember looking at lighthouses around Philadelphia at one point, mostly because I wanted to make a reference to lighthouses. And I realized that there weren't any, that there are some, they either weren't built the time I wanted to be. Basically, they were built years afterwards. Even a space of a few years or 10 years, something like that. And just little things like that. I wanted to reference. I wanted to make sure that I was trying to be as close as possible, even though I do bend a little bit of the history sometimes. Because it's fantasy. I have magic. Don't have to be 100% historically accurate, which is the thing I had to remember at times too. I don't have to be 100%, but I wanted to be kind of close to it, that it still gets that's not too far away, because I might as well write alternate history, a total alternate history. So just looking at small things to make it kind of mostly accurate, mostly so it won't be too out of place.
Mm-hmm. So when you made your magic system, did you sort of create it as you went along, or did you map it out pretty extensively in reference to it as you wrote?
I think so, because since it's more of I guess it's loose, being I just use the constellations. I have certain set constellations that the characters use. Mm-hmm. they won't use like they don't use like more of the weird modern ones, like like a microscope or telescope. They use more of like the typical ones. You think the zodiac ones, like Orion, Andromeda, those constellations, I guess. And I kind of stuck with those, but I set also rules of like how it was done. Like it has to be drawn or perhaps sewn or like painted, that sort of thing. That has the rules is like it's the rules are basically built around like how it's created and like how the effects of how it's seen. Like my view, like whenever the magic's done, like it's gonna glow, it's gonna be very visible, which is like one of the downsides of the magic system, that you can't really quietly do the magic. It's gonna be seen by no matter how much you try.
Okay. So do people, depending on their skill level, can everyone sort of, if they're skilled enough, everyone could cast the same spells, or do people have specific sort of types of spells that they're attuned to?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is my vision of the magic system was it was created basically on plantations. It's created by people who just had the stars. So there isn't a set written down rules book yet. Everyone they can do it, but everyone does it different ways. Like there's a joke I had with between the main character and some of the supporting characters, is that one character will have a list of they'll use X, Y, and Z spells for certain constellations. That's all as always. But the main character will use any constellation that suits their needs at the moment, whether it's easier or simpler to do. If it's a hard one, easy to do, depending on what kind of spell, how complicated spell she's trying to do. She'll do whatever one she wants, and that's because there's no rules of there's no rules about how it's done. It's mostly just most of the rules around the certain limitations of it, and I guess it's mostly me, my way, kind of exploring how this is what happens more of an organic of magic, where it's kind of developed without a typical rule set, which is a contrast to the other more stricter rules, which was the sorcery rules, which is it's like a typical spell books, right? Where constellation's more like it's organic, it's different, it's changing, there's no set rules, and that what makes it creative for certain people, and it makes it confusing for other people.
Yeah.
So, and it's I'm worried I'm confusing people.
No, it makes sense to me. It's pretty cool. I like that explanation. So you mentioned some of the stuff that you like to read. Can you talk about, like either books, music, TV, maybe not necessarily that inspired this book, but which kind of inspire your creative imagination?
I read a lot of different things, to be honest. I guess I mostly read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, but I dip into toes in a lot of different genres, whether it's plus of course mysteries, there's also reading a lot of younger adults, like the young adult middle grade fantasies, which I actually found a lot of more recent middle grade fantasy lately has been more, they have been more very fascinating how free flowing a lot of their fantasy worlds are. There's less, I feel like there's less restrictions in some sense compared to adult fantasy and young adult fantasy for some reason.
Okay.
And let's see, I think I also dipped reading a lot of I don't know, romance, especially historical romance too. Mostly because it's funny. It's that even though I'm not a really big romance reader in general, or even a writer in that sense, but reading their books, it's the way they approach history was one of the ways that it kind of helps me approach history when I'm writing this book, because it's using it's the trappings of history, but also using the way that you can also convey some aspect of history, but still focusing on the plot itself, which is different from historical fiction or typical historical mysteries. And it's kind of fun looking at those different contrasts of how it's being used, and it was just things that just reading different stuff, different genres kind of helped me kind of figure out what pieces I wanted to take and kind of utilize for my story, because my source is a genre mixture, different things. So I always feel really bad when I'm saying, I'm listing out it's a historical mystery fantasy. I feel like a mouthful, and so I'm just taking up different things together.
Yeah. So what about TVs and shows? Anything? Do you find time to watch much?
Sometimes I have a few shows I'll be kind of watching to kind of follow along. I don't have actually the list. It's been, I guess, as shows ended, it's gone they dwindled more recently. But it's kind of fun. I think the last big one I've been following for years was Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. recently. That has ended. which it's kind of one of those like a steadfast like the so that's I always liked watching. But it did also tackle like every science fiction trope out there, which amused me at the end. Like at the end of the show, they hit every science fiction thing you can watch. And I recently finished up The Mandalorian,
Okay.
that was a lot of fun, and mostly because I always liked Star Wars, but it's like as much sense like everyone likes it. It's like a big cultural thing, so I like it as much. But I think and also you got the Mandalorian. It kind of tackles one major complaint I had with Star Wars in general is that it gets to see more of the world, like it's supporting character in some sense, because they always have all the main films are like really kind of centered on like a certain view of the Star Wars universe. It's mostly like the battlegrounds between like two forces that are like more of like figureheads in certain things, whereas I guess The Mandalorian lets you get to kind of see more of the world, which is something I like more of. Like with Rogue One, got to see more different aspects of the world and stuff, which that was kind of fun. And I don't know, just anything in general. I think I've been watching like cooking shows recently. Mostly, I guess, it's because of the creative thing in the background. Even though some of them are very typical, they can pick out who's going to win at the end of certain thing. But that's mostly just more of at least something I can watch without like thinking too much about narrative about stuff. I think one problem with being a writer sometimes is like I start poking holes in like certain shows, like, oh, I could do this differently, or this could have been different. And that's always a hard thing, especially when I'm in editing mode. For like when I read, whenever like I'm doing anything really, reading books, watching movies, TV shows, and whatnot, I start critiquing certain things. Like it'll be slightly different because I'm in that mode of looking for like problems and seeing what I can fix with it. So.
What about do you watch much history? Since you wrote a historical novel, do you watch much of it?
No, I think I'll watch some shows. Like Lovecraft Country was one of the more recent ones. I don't watch too many historical dramas. I guess mostly I get picky at certain things. I think sometimes the history shows aren't always time periods I'm really interested in looking into. A lot of times they're like, I don't know, they aren't too interesting for me to watch. Or I just sometimes I'll get or actually research or I know enough about the history part they're talking about, and I'm not that interested because I know that I'll be worried. I'll be like, I'm one of those people who be like nitpicking. Oh, this is like totally wrong. There's like, I know there's a film that came out a few years ago. I remember that I had read the book it was based off of, but the film, even though it said it was based off the nonfiction book, it had took liberties with the timeline to kind of rearrange things to make it fit the movie timeline, whereas in the book, in the real life, it was totally different. Like it was spaced of 10 years that all these events, they just rearranged in the film. And that just bothered me enough that I wish they made like original characters with the film instead of making it like a biography in the sense. But it's like, it's like little things like that. So but in general, I don't watch too many historical stuff, I mean, sometimes I watch a documentary or two, but not often enough. It's more of I guess since I lean more in towards the fiction side, it's more of like, I see history as more of like an inspiration for certain things. Like sometimes I'll read, I don't know, sometimes I'll pick up something like a nonfiction historical, either history based or otherwise. And it's kind of used as a launch point to get inspired for the story, whether or not it's in that time period or moved around differently. So.
Well, let me ask about your writing process. Is there, compared to other writers, or is there any aspect of your writing that you consider different from what other people do, either to finish your drafts or any aspect of the process?
I don't think in general. I remember people talk about the writing process. I always have the really complicated. I mean, it's fairly simple. I mean, I still use Word. I still I try to write sequentially mostly, especially when the first drafts. I'll write from the first chapter and I just go to all the way to the end as possible, that sort of thing. I don't use any note cards or anything like that, or any kind of fancy programs and whatnot. And I do a lot of, I know, especially when I was actually going outside to work and stuff, I would always carry notebooks with me and would during my lunch break, since my workplace was across from the public library, so I would take part of the lunch break, go out in the library to write down a scene, or write down brainstorm like an outline in a sense for the scene I wanted to write that evening after work. and you just use those minutes to write down by hand, which I kind of really miss. It's kind of hard to do. I can still do that here working from home, but it's not as different. It's a little different.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did a lot of that actually. I have actually kept a lot of notebooks I had written for this book and other stuff. It's kind of nice. I have so many little notebooks I had collected over years, mostly like stand-up notebooks. And I have a nice little. I think I took a picture once when I had moved. I had collected all the notebooks I had, like about like 20 or so within the last 2 years, just filled with my terrible handwriting of notes and stuff. But no, that's basically the drafting process with me. I think because I work full time, I gotten really structured with at certain times of working at when I get home after and recoup from the day. I have this set time. I basically start writing and just write until I go to bed and I usually try to aim for when I'm drafting 2,000 words. Which I just kind of slowly broke my way up to getting to that because it's because it's the only really window of time I would have to write basically, and that kind of helped me get into the process of getting the draft out basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess when it comes to revisions, when I get to that process, I kind of make a list of things that I knew I wanted to change as I'm because I let myself think about all the different plot twists around the writing and just make a list of things I want to change, want to improve better. Make note of certain arcs, that sort of thing. Just make a list of all those different things, and just start going back and just going revising and stuff. I actually go through several processes of revising. So most partly because I make sure I do a sound check for the mystery element. Because the mystery element is like one of the, I guess even when I'm drafting is like I figure out who the murderer is, why they did it, and ultimately like what method it was, and have that kind of locked down. And that pretty much is the only thing that doesn't change throughout. No matter how much I revise, that kind of stays pretty solid. So I make sure that's kind of locked down. And everything else is like kind of details, how much of certain scenes of whether it's like all the mystery solving aspect of and also make sure there's like a kind of character work aspect of it too. I think a big part of me is one showing like the interior lives of these characters. So I make sure there's an art for that and kind of just going, making sure that's kind of there too. And just do different passes and different things. And I don't know, I guess I see revision as the longest, the most organic, the most interesting part for me, because the drafting part is like pulling teeth out. Like I got to get these words out. But revisions, I get to play around and kind of see what moves around. Actually, a lot of times we do a revision, like it just transforms the book. I literally at some point I'll actually break the book. I call it breaking the book, where I go in and just move scenes around and just see how that works better. And sometimes scenes I wrote later in the book kind of works better earlier and vice versa, depending on certain arcs. It's just like it's a weird way of just figuring out how your brain works. But I think because I'm always thinking about the book, I guess it's easier for me to kind of play around and with the revision part.
So, and this is your debut novel, is that correct?
Yes.
So, so now that you have this debut novel, has having this come out, has it changed? Have you found that you've changed your approach to writing at all?
I don't know. It's too hard to tell. It's kind of just, been waiting for a while for this, especially since it got bumped too since it was supposed to come out last fall. So I got more time to I guess still be in the part where it's still like the new part of everything. It's still coming out, still kind of new. The reality hasn't really quite set in yet. I think also I've been busy with the follow-up, which I'm actually working in hard work of revising right now. And so I've been busy with that, and I don't know. I think it's weird. I don't know if it's changed slightly. It also made me more of, I guess because I've always had a structure anyway of like keeping on top of things. It doesn't really change much. It does change. I think one thing changes that is, I guess, the worries about like, it's going to be people actually going to start reading it soon. Like it's not just going to be like a small circle of people. Like strangers are going to read this. And I think one point with the second book I'm working on is like, it's me thinking at one point I was thinking like, I wouldn't, by the time I finish this one up, I won't have like feedback from the first book, know what I did wrong, that sort of thing. And it's getting all these little worries about like what's, the hypothetical strangers are going to say, and that sort of thing. And I guess those worries you get like while you're just in that quiet space of like waiting for the stuff to come out and not in the anxiety of like not knowing what people are going to say because you don't know. Because I think since the book hasn't come out yet, it's like there's and mostly anticipation. I don't know what's going to happen basically, but just I'm trying to enjoy it too because it's you don't get to debut more than once, so trying to enjoy that as well.
Yeah.
And just trying not to worry too much about what people are going to say, and just
right, yeah. I mean, we know in social media people there's lots of praise, but there's also lots of
you remember the bad thing. You can hear 50 good things, and that one bad thing will be like you'll hear it, you'll think about it all the time. So.
I'm speaking with Nicole Glover, author of The Conductors. You can find more information about her work at nicole-glover.com. If you like this episode of Full Contact Nerd interviews so far, please subscribe and hit the like button. If you want daily book suggestions for new fiction and nonfiction studies in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mysteries, gaming, game design, film history, and more, please check out my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, my podcast, Full Contact Nerd Interviews, and my webpage, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. If you're looking for military history and general history, including true crime, please check out my YouTube channel, War Scholar, my podcast, Military History Inside Out, and my webpage, warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com. If you're looking for space history and the science, technology, and business of space, check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, my podcast, Technology in Space, and my website, technologyandspace.com. Now back to the video. Well, so if someone, what would bother you the most, do you think? If you got some kind of complaint, would you, if someone complained about the plot or the characterization or what part of it do you think you'd be most sensitive to? If you want to answer that, that might be too personal, but
I'm not going to say everything, someone's like complaining about anything about it because the book's perfect in my eyes. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. Would be outside of the obvious, the obvious stuff that people troll people out on the internet about. I don't know. I guess critiques of being a misunderstanding of what to be doing, trying to do, or something like that, or I don't know. Even something silly as I made lighthearted about the history, because even though it's a historical setting, I'm playing more with the genre of the fantasy and mystery aspects of it, and I don't know. I mean, I try to even have fun within the story, and it's not going to be try not to make the bleak historical retelling of stuff. So I don't know. I guess I'll see. I don't know. I can't really think of a particular complaint other than that's the general global. It's terrible, worst book ever. I'll make sure you'll never write again. That sort of thing.
Well, I guess that's sort of what because I know it's an odd question, but I guess sort of, would you be more bothered by someone picking on something specific, or just someone saying, I don't like this is no good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Or even a weird a historical thing, something that wasn't 100% historical accurate, and because it's it's fantasy, it's and then that's the whole review is about complaining about I'm not 100% historical accurate about something, or something that's minor, or I don't know, or just because they just say that or even just because anything that I portray in the book is unbelievable because it's not typical of what the story's about. I think one of the things I guess I try to make the character reflective of my world of view as of trying to be as diverse within the characters and within not just the characters I created, but in the world setting itself, and even careful in my writing itself. I try to be inclusive in that sense, as even when I can in narrations. I think one thing I viewed when I was writing it, that there's a different voice between the narration that I'm using to narrate the certain things and what the main character's point of view narration is. And I don't know, I guess I kind of differentiate that with some of the board terms. I'm not sure if some of the people will pick up on that or not. It's like minor stuff, just being like a gender inclusive, basically using they pronouns in certain places within the story narration, where in contrast to when the character herself is narrating or dialogue, and certain things like that. Just minor stuff to being as within this building in the story. So,
did you put any characters in that that sort of, I don't want to say autobiographical, but are sort of like you in the book? Did you do anything like that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I always feel like every character I write has it's like a part of me in there. Like it's certain aspects of me in there. Like it's one part, maybe like my love of books in one character, or it's my all the opinions I don't say all out, because this one character is the one that says all the certain things. Or this other character is like, oh, this is the gloomy, the cynical character, that sort of thing. And they all have different aspects of me in that different things. In that sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of do whenever you write characters. Like you're just taking aspects of yourself and just either dialing up or dialing it down.
Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned other work, non-writing work that you've done. How has the other work that you've done influenced how or what you write?
Yeah, let's say there's different ways. I know there's things like my day job, for example, gets me organized for certain things. It gets me focused on, I guess, the process of either working on stuff, working with other people, that sort of thing. Kind of work as a UX researcher. So it's like the person who looks into it, makes you click, select their something in apps and make the websites more friendly to kind of use. Mm-hmm. And I come from that, and between a psych background, certain things. That's one aspect of certain things. And I think also it makes me interested and easily do with the research stuff, easily interested in doing the research things, get me interested in like the smaller, less known things, and kind of work that certain things in there. Mm-hmm. I just done different things. I know writing wise, I've done different stuff. Like I messed around with playwriting and writing the TV script, pilot stuff. Just most of it was like, some of it was like experiments, some of it was exercises and trying to write that stuff and learning that that you can put too many characters in the play and it makes or screenplay and it doesn't read as well as you do with the novels. Like those are different things like that. I also do a lot of tinkering with art stuff, like Photoshop stuff. I like playing around with Photoshop. I think one of the things with having my books being delayed a bit, I had more time to play with all the graphics for book design and stuff like that, and trying to mess around with GIFs and just little different things like that. I guess it's called like flexing a different creative aspect of your mind, which is kind of helpful in some ways because it gets you to think of problem solving differently.
Right. So for this novel, what is the aesthetic of the book? If it had a soundtrack, what would you feel like the soundtrack and the feel of the book is?
I think it'll probably be like a mix of the Sherlock Holmes, the 2009 film series, especially like the end credits, that sort of stuff. Okay. A lot of strings, violins, instrumental stuff. I think mostly because a lot of stuff I end up writing. It's part of my writing playlist, I guess. Yeah. That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe some piano music in there. Mm-hmm. A lot of instrumental, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. When you edited the book, or when the book was being edited, either by yourself or once you submitted it, did you have to take a lot out? Like, did you overwrite and have to cut back, or expand on what you did?
I'm trying to think. I think when I was throughout editing process, I tend to write over when I draft, so I tend to try to cut things down a little bit. That's mostly just tweaking and fine tuning stuff, combining characters, just retooling certain scenes and move things around like that. Mm-hmm. I don't remember any major cuts I did. I did with the first book. I actually, just before the final copy edit stuff, for the last go, I ended up adding like an extra one scene in there that I was going back and forth before I turned the book in, because it's one of the things I do with with the book, I have a series of like interludes, about 6 of them that do like a quick little flashback through the character's past, acting a little bit as a short story, and also as a way to convey stuff that I didn't want to sit down and stop in the main narrative to tell you. I thought we were interested in kind of show these little aspects of it, because it's, you know, it's one aspect. It's also me showing off history stuff, also too doing a character moment, because the book itself takes place within a week, so I don't have a lot of time to do certain past events I wanted to reference. And anyway, one of these interludes was one of the ones that I was going back and forth where I wanted to cut or keep, and I couldn't get it right. I think I wrote this particular scene about 10 different times in the following, leading up to like turning in the book in for real. And I think at the very last moment, I figured out what to fix with it and put it back in there. And I was really happy I got it in there, because I wanted, it's a small moment. It's probably, I think, one of the shorter ones, but I really wanted to have it in there just because it was just another character aspect of the work, and allow to see the characters more outside of just the mystery stuff. So, because one of the big things I found as a revision, I wanted to show them like living their lives basically outside the mystery.
Yeah, right. So this is sort of a whimsical question. When you were younger, was there a power technology or fictional setting that you yearned for or wanted to be a part of?
Let's see. Let me think. There's a particular one. I think, I don't know, I guess I was going with my first one, probably Sailor Moon. I was really a big fan of Sailor Moon, the series that came out, and I always loved the little gadgets, and I guess the little gadgets they had, like I guess the transformation weapons and whatnot. And I guess that was like kind of the first really big fantastical magical thing I saw as a young person, basically. And I always really liked that, and that's probably like started my love for astrology and astronomy, and it kind of stuck with me. And I don't know if I ever wanted to be in the world particularly, but I like the idea of having magical powers like that. I guess ability to do certain things and see things happen. I always like I guess I'm the type of kid that used to wonder as a young child, like, why was I born in this boring world where there's no magic and you can't do anything fantastic? Because I'm a big believer of the multiverse. Basically, there's different worlds out there that we are unable to get to because of dimensional things. And so another world, basically, there's a world where I have magical powers, basically. And I feel very strongly that world exists, and that sort of thing.
Cool. Now, have you ever done cosplay or attended cosplays? Are you familiar with that?
I know, I'm familiar with that. I'm really not that good at sewing, and I guess even though I like the idea of a good costume, I don't know, I'm just weird about, I guess, getting it all together and taking the time for all this other stuff. I do admire a lot of people who have really, because I've seen lots of really good like cosplay photos, and I really admire like all the attention to detail, the craftsmanship. But I could never do that.
So did you so you mentioned some of what it took to finish the book up. Were there any other difficulties in getting it finished or published?
I think it's just a lot of, I guess, it's timing stuff. I guess it's just the first. It's like, it's the first thing I'm publishing professionally at all. So it's like it's just different. That's just getting used to, working with an editing team, working with timelines, working deadlines. I was working with other people's other things and all that other things, and also accepting that some things are beyond my control. There's so much like you can't do. Like, even though, like I said, I could turn this to draft in and saying I want this book published like right away within 2 months, and like I can't do that, that sort of thing. And just trying to admit, like, once certain things are beyond your control, which I think is the kind of the hardest part. I think like it's with once getting especially traditionally publishing, is that there's this, you only really control you can writing the words, and some writing the words on the page and everything like that. And it's beyond everything else. You can't really, there's too much you can do. And it's just, I guess, also realizing is how slow publishing used to be. Because I think, as a big reader, like, I never really thought about how long it takes for a book to come out. I just always thought a book appears in the library, a book appears in the bookstore, and it's there. I never thought about like how long it takes, or even when like books come out in general. The one thing I found that has got involved with publishing is that I'm like hyper aware, like when the book's being published out to be out in bookstores, out and everything like that. Whereas before, I'm like, oh, it just shows up. Like I remember in the library, like it shows up in the news stack, even though it's like been pub and now technically about only 4 or 5 months, because I found that some of the libraries, it takes a while. I guess they're in processing for a while. I remember when it's a book I really wanted to read, I was waiting for it to come to the library. And I remember like waiting for like 3 months for it to come in. It was like in processing for that long. And I was like, is processing the key word for like librarians reading books? I don't know. I figured I have to read the book to know what's like good for the patrons, but I was like, there's little things like that. But I'm just hyper aware of like when books are coming out, like instead of being like, oh, this shows up, which is an interesting shift and all that kind of stuff. But also that on the other flip side is that when I'm talking about I'm writing a book or I'm publishing a book, and people ask when it's coming out, and they're like, and I think, oh, it's like I'm thinking like 6 months. Oh, that's too far away, and they're like, oh, that's really far away. That's 6 months, and that especially felt like that more last year too. Like that sense of a time being this like really loop thing. Like it feels like 6 months feels like 10 years and stuff. So it's like that's an interesting thing about everything.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're revising this follow-up, the follow-up novel. Do you have something else on the plate beyond that, or are you just totally focused on this right now?
I got something that hasn't been officially announced yet that I'm really excited about, which it kind of is a surprise thing that happened last year, but I can't really say too much about it for now.
Okay.
And I'm hoping there will come something, but nothing else that I can officially say. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So where can people find you on the web? Do you have social media, website?
Yeah, my website it's basically my name, Nicole-Glover.com, and I have a Twitter handle. It's basically it's Nicole, and instead of this being Glover, I replaced the V with a W, so it's like Glower.
Yeah.
Like Glover. It's just a funny spelling thing because one, someone already took my name. I have a really common name for some reason, and two, I didn't want to. Sometimes I misspell my name, and it comes in a W sometimes. But I thought it was kind of funny. But those are kind of two main places you'll find me at.
So and I'll just spell it for listeners and viewers. So it's Nicole, Nicoole, and Glover, Glover. And you said so again that you said Twitter. It's Nicole Glover.
Yeah.
With the W instead of V.
That's the W with W instead of V.
And it's just one word. It doesn't have a dash or anything, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts or words? No,
it's kind of exciting. I think, and it's getting, since I'm debuting, it's like I'm starting to do all the fun Arthur events now. So it's great. It's kind of great talking. It's fun. I'm really fairly shy in person, but talking about a book, I'm really easy for doing that for some reason. So it's fun. It's fun talking, fun answering questions, certain things. So it was fun talking with you.
So just to add, so pre-COVID, I guess the plans were you going to do a book tour of, if it were coming out in the fall last year?
I think it should have. The thing is, my book was so early when all this everything changed that nothing was set in stone yet. That's mostly why it was easy for me to get pushed into this year, and because it was, because my book was originally set in November of last year. So now when all the COVID kind of started up, it wasn't. My arcs weren't even done yet, so it wasn't like it was still like early for stuff. So it's like it was easy thing to move around. So I imagine if everything was in the alternate universe where it did come out, I would have had the book tour and whatnot stuff. So
okay, yeah. Thanks so much for speaking with me.
It was great. It was fun.
Thanks. Thank you for watching this video version of Full Contact Nerd Interviews. If you liked the episode, please subscribe and hit the like button. If you'd like more book suggestions or information on fiction and storytelling, including sci-fi, horror, fantasy, mysteries, thrillers, film history, gaming, and more, please check out my podcast, Full Contact Nerd Interviews, my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, and my webpage, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. If you're looking for military history and general history, including true crime, Please check out my YouTube channel, War Scholar, my podcast, Military History Inside Out, and my webpage, warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com. If you're looking for space history and the science, technology, and business of space, check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, my podcast, Technology in Space, and my website, technologyandspace.com. Thank you for watching, and keep imagining the past, the present, and the future.